All right. So there we go. Mike, how we doing?
Good. How you doing, brother?
Could be doing better. Could be doing without the technical difficulties, but we'll make do. This isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
good. We're talking a little bit before this. I think it's an interesting time to be a real estate investor for sure.
Yes, I find it very interesting. It was almost comical about 4 or 5 weeks ago how confident every real estate investor was feeling, and then all of a sudden it's like a switch flipped overnight about how much people are kind of shitting their pants a little bit and really unsure of what's going to happen. And I don't know why everyone was so confident. I think it was just a lot of like posturing and hope, probably a lot of like hoping it doesn't get too bad, but being able to say like, oh, look at the stock market and look at us. But yeah, I just think it's funny how it's kind of continued to trickle in and, affect everyone. I don't know anything that's not affected. I was actually reading a really cool article today. People posted, it was like I think it was from the Washington Post. And it was like day by day, how different big businesses, because that's who they care about, were being affected by different things. So it was talking about, banks to cruise lines to hedge funds to Amazon to like AMC theaters and all of these different companies, like day by day, different decisions they were making. And I thought it was just really interesting to see how like different people were affected and how certain companies who had branches of their company overseas were able to kind of see it quicker and react differently than a lot of other people. But yeah, very quickly for anyone that's watching before we get too far into it, can you give me 1 to 2 minutes on who you are, your background, stuff like that, and just kind of fill people in?
Absolutely. So my name is Michael Ketchen, and I own my real estate investing company, Commonwealth Collective LLC, with my wife Hannah and our business partner Matthew Hitchcock. I'm a former urban school special education teacher and administrator, and we've been doing this now for actually this week was the 3-year anniversary of closing our first deal. And in 3 years, we've scaled that up to about 80 apartments, 4 Airbnbs, about $8 million worth of holdings, and primarily using the BRRRR method and raising private capital.
Awesome. So I know so is it just Airbnb, multifamily, or is there anything else to it?
It's really, so what we usually do is try to kind of value add, and we self-manage. Again, we're big on systems. We've done some flips, we've done some wholesales, but really our foundation is value add, small, say 8 to 40 unit building, multifamily buildings, and Airbnbs. As like we talked about before, we're kind of in the more traditional sense of a vacation rental. We happen to be in the Kennebunkport market, where they're Airbnbs, but they're more traditional vacations, meaning people are going for a week-long stay, a 2-week-long stay, which kind of leads to the conversation we were having, where, knock on wood, we've been in a good spot compared to what's going on with Airbnb, meaning we've actually had an uptick in requests from people just wanting to get away. Whereas I know some other Airbnb investors where this is not a time to say, have 5 luxury apartments in downtown Boston that you're subletting. Conferences are getting canceled. People are not traveling. You are just getting slaughtered right now. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for sure.
How many Airbnb properties listings do you have?
We have 3 right now. We're closing on our 4th on Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah, because it was interesting. I don't know if you saw, and I didn't record it, but I had my buddy Farber on, who also has Airbnbs, and he was saying very similar things to you. And a lot of this kick-started off is when we were just talking back and forth on DM on Instagram, and I've, personally thought, I was like, wow, all Airbnbs are going to get crushed. And then you were telling me like, hey, no, we've actually seen an uptick. Like things are actually going pretty good. And I was like, huh, like, why is that? Like, I wanted to understand more. And as you started telling me more about it, I was like, okay, that makes a ton of sense. And I was like, okay, I need to fully do this. Like I was like 95% sure I wanted to do this like 30-day challenge, get people on, talk about things. But when you started changing my perception, I was like, okay, if there's something out there that I'm not fully understanding, there's so many people that aren't understanding so many different sectors. And I was like, this needs to happen. So I thought it was very interesting. And Farber also, his properties are down in like Asheville, North Carolina, which is
Yeah.
also a very,
Yeah.
not middle of nowhere, but, kind of out of the way, definitely not urban. It's, quasi rural, quasi suburban. And he said, yeah, same thing. Like people wanted like 1-2 month stays for discounts from the 1 to 5 day stay, but still cash flow positive, and just people that wanted to get out of the city or out of. He said like one family I think was from DC and they just wanted to get out of there. I was like,
Well,
wow, that makes a ton of sense.
and this kind of goes back to something we've talked about. We were, I spoke at a panel at the New Hampshire REIA a couple of months back. And one of the things that we discussed was, I said with Airbnb, it's the same kind of founding principles of any real estate. Your location and your asset type matters. Might be a little different, meaning, we went to Kennebunk and Kennebunkport because they were traditional vacation getaways before Airbnb and VRBO. Their entire economy is built on that. So we knew we were going to be welcomed, and there might be some legislation changes, things like that. Whereas a market we were looking to break into, we were actually scheduling a trip to go out a few weeks ago, and we actually pivoted. One, because legislation is actually changing in real time in COVID, was Scottsdale, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Scottsdale, there's a lot of pushback. They're talking about changing legislation. So if you're going and paying top dollar for a premium rental to primarily make the numbers work as a short-term seasonal rental, if that legislation, if you're going in without that being the backbone of that economy, I think you're taking a huge risk. And now you could quickly get upside down and find yourself in a spot where it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of, we've looked at the Carolinas. We're actively looking in Florida. But we don't want to do, for example, in Boston, out our way, Portland, Maine is a really hot market.
Mm-hmm.
They've come out and they flat out have gone against Airbnbs unless you're an owner occupied. You really got to know your legislation. So I equate it to like when we buy our value add multifamilies, we go based with population, with job growth, where we're a little bit easier on the East Coast compared to, I think, of other parts of the country. But that's one thing I was hoping to pick your brain on, is the job sector and the makeup of your tenant base, how it's been affected by this whole thing. Because I got a couple interesting thoughts, but I'd love to hear from you who's got a couple thousand units, looking at this.
Yeah, I mean, we have done as best we can to dive into like what our tenant base is and what it's looked like. I think we found like in Florida. Do you still have the IG Live on your phone? Because I can hear myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get that off there.
Yeah, turn it off. What was I saying? Yeah, down in Florida, I think we had like 10 or 12% of our tenants were like working in the retail sector.
Yes, they go away.
Yeah, so we started looking at things like that, like how is it affected from that stuff. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what our tenant base is. However, a lot of our tenant base is government employees, healthcare, military, essential services, stuff like that. So that's why one of the things we always looked for in a market was like job diversity. So we never wanted to rely very heavily on one thing. Like we've had some people push back on us like, hey, how come you don't pick, military towns? Like one market we've avidly avoided is Fayetteville, because that's like all military. And Jacksonville, Florida is heavy military, but it's only about, I want to say 20%, give or take.
Comes in on your debt too. Won't they challenge you on something that some lenders don't want to see a certain percentage above that, right?
It depends, but I mean, people buy in Fayetteville, so there's lenders who will lend on it. You just gotta, there is debt out there for it. Some people love it, some people hate it. Same thing on equity. Some people see it as a bonus, some people see it as a negative. But we always saw it as like, yeah, maybe your military is going to be there forever, and they're going to be great paying tenants and great people, and you're providing housing for a great service. But God forbid something happens where the military needs to deploy and your tenant base vanishes overnight. You're so reliant on that one thing. That's why it's, the same thing with, triple net leases or industrial or, different things like that, retail, where you have an anchor tenant. Like everybody that had a Sears and Macy's, 3, 5, 7 years ago, they've been struggling. I mean, the amount of strip malls that are 50% occupied, 30% occupied, 70% occupied are so high because they were so reliant on one tenant. We didn't want to rely so heavily on one tenant base. That was Jacksonville, Florida did not have that diversity in 2008. So we got crushed. Same thing with Atlanta. both of those markets got absolutely crushed. But
Yeah.
now they're much more diversified. And I think the government's did a phenomenal job on correcting that and encouraging different businesses to come in and create some of that diversity, which I think will help anybody that's in those types of markets, through the next 2, 3, 5, 6, 12 months, whatever, however long we're affected by this.
And that, and it's funny you say that, because one of my takeaway is going to be whether this lasts 2 months, 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
This is obviously a very unique event. I don't think this is going to happen potentially ever again in our lifetime. Who knows? But my takeaway is going to be, what kind of questions are you asking yourself now as an investor? What kind of contingency plans are you making where you weren't thinking before? Like, I can tell you one conversation we're having now that we never thought we'd entertain was kind of, okay, if you're looking at who's still working, who's got some security, and you're a value add investor, I'm a value add investor. We're a little different in our models, but we're after the same kind of deals,
Sure.
Forcing appreciation. And what me and my team are really, modeling out right now and looking at is saying, okay, we plan to buy and hold. We used to say forever. It's private money. You hurry up and wait. What we're looking at now is we've really built some serious equity in. And if we take the next couple of years and maybe we get a couple more deals the type we've done, do we now actually cash those in and roll all that capital, $4, $5, $6 million into an A-class asset, knowing that, it might not be the value add play, but from a wealth maintaining play, is that tenant base safer because they're remote workers? And I'm really curious to see how this shakes out long term. I was talking to my CPA about this actually, because they got some big clients that they're worried about the commercial real estate coming back in terms of office spaces and leases. So it got me thinking that, okay, do I really need to look at these remote workers and these higher asset classes for tenant bases as a more secure place? So do I need to cash in my chips and go park my money there where I wasn't even looking at that previously? You know what I mean?
No, I hear you 100%. I think that's something we spoke about pretty in depth. I'm involved in like 1 or 2 groups and masterminds. And one of the things we spoke about was like, what asset class within multifamily do we think is going to get least affected? And I think it's going to be like your B plus. And the reason being is because everyone, I still think A is always going to be your most at risk when you hit any sort of recession, depression, because there's nothing to trickle down from, right? There's nothing higher that people can downsize into, which puts you at risk, because if people decide to downsize, well, now you've just got to lower rents to try to attract people back. When you're in B and C, you can have some of that trickle down effect, even, D, into some of that stuff where I don't think, and as far as I've heard from other people, because obviously I've only been doing this 3.5, 4 years, I wasn't around during 08. Yeah. But what I do think is very interesting that we were talking about is very different than 2008 from what I've understood, is a lot of white collar jobs got significantly more affected than they are today, where you were kind of talking about a lot of the white collar jobs can go remote. If it's the, financial advisor, if it's the CPA, if it's the
pharmaceuticals,
the marketing firm, all those different things, it's significantly easier to go work from home, online, stuff like that, than it is, someone who works in retail, or the bartender, or, someone that works in construction now that construction has been shut down, So I think it's interesting like that. And I think you probably get a greater, and this is purely no facts, purely like my gut. I think you get probably a lot more like healthcare government people in the B space than you do in the A, because I think a lot of those people eventually probably want to own their own stuff, and they're not renters by choice. A lot of the A stuff is renters by choice. And I think B is still a lot of people that are renter by necessity and are in B waiting to move into homeowner. And I think those are a lot of quasi lower paying, but very safe, secure jobs that are backed by government, healthcare, massive jobs, stuff like that. So,
and that's, again, we were lockstep with you. That's where we went. Like, and another thing we're doing, we're taking an even closer look. As we talked the other night via email, we constantly market our units, even when we don't have vacants. My business partner, Matt, does a tremendous job. He handles that for us. And I think we've had over this weekend, 30 inquiries, which, when you're talking
How many
about
units?
30 inquiries on our one ad this is for a 1-bedroom apartment.
Right, but how many units do you guys have in total? Just curious.
It's, what is it? 76 regular apartments.
Okay.
76. So you're talking, we keep one up. We've got it up. It's a 1-bedroom ad. But what we're doing now, we're looking closer at what jobs are coming in, which again led to this question where I started looking back at my own life. And to your point, I'm waiting for the data to come out. But I think that B and C, if this is any inkling of where technology is going and what space is coming, I think that was kind of seen as safer. And what I'm stepping back now is I'm saying, okay, even now education is going virtual. More and more traditional jobs are going virtual exclusively. So if their income is going to continue to go, how do you pivot to that as an investor? You know what I mean? How do I go? Because it's already competitive in the multifamily, value add space to begin with. How do I leverage? And again, it's not a wealth creation tool. And that's the part that I'm still trying to struggle with, is that you're not going to go create, well, you will, but you know what I mean? You're not going to go create and force appreciation buying an A-class asset.
It's going to be a more longer-term wealth creation than a 1 to 4 year wealth creation.
Exactly. And where we're looking at it saying, perfect example right now, we have, anywhere from $400,000 to $700,000 in equity in each one of our buildings. Okay, well, if we pool that together, and now we're going to buy that, $12 million A-class asset because we dumped everything into this. Do we just recreate that? And now you're parking your money in a few of these complexes where, again, was never even on our radar. We were, hey, we'll go out because what we specialize in, let's go find that 24 unit that's being mismanaged. We can streamline, increase the NOI by 30 to 35%, refi out and hold it. We're just trying to get to a couple hundred doors doing that over and over and over. And now we're really taking a look. I mean, it's nothing we're going to do overnight, but this whole experience has definitely made us take a look at that. It's made us look at our foundation, and what I go back to, and I think this has really highlighted this, is that you make your money on the buy, and the principles are key no matter what you're doing, because, we're having our theory tested. We never wanted it to, but we all went full time with this within 3 years. And we always said the beauty of our deals were we could stress test them and we could significantly reduce our owner's draw. We bought it right, and here we are doing it. We're all taking probably 25 to 30% pay cut for the next 3 months while we figure this out. Luckily, we're in a position where we can do it. But I think of the investors, and I think that's where the opportunity is going to come up, where if you're making thin margins and tight margins on these deals already, I don't know if you can withstand that 20 to 30% correction for the next couple of months in this unprecedented event. So I'll be curious to see if that's where the opportunity comes.
No, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of people who have seen the market go up for, 10 years now, let's say. And, so much new capital has come in the last 5 years, especially with the rise of technology, right? Like if you just think about 10 years ago with cell phones, I mean, you were at like a basic iPhone level, like internet wasn't a thing. Apps weren't really a thing. I think probably text messages were still limited, right? Like that was the world we lived in. Like maybe not, text messages were probably still there, but you definitely had limited minutes still. I don't know, but like, it was just a very different world. And I think we have such short-term memories, and it's like, Instagram hasn't been around that long. Like these companies haven't been around that long. Like online marketing for apartments hasn't been that mainstream except in the last 3 to 5 years. It wasn't necessarily as big as it is today, and how, like so normalized. And because so much capital has come in, and just things have just continued to go up and up and up and up and up, and cap rates have continued to go down and down and down and down and down. It was just, the new norm for a lot of people. Like when I entered 3.5, 4 years ago, in the markets we were in, a 6 cap, 6.25 cap was not atypical. It was only when I first got there that like the Carolinas, within 6 months, they went down into the 5s, like the mid 5s. That was like, because that was when I came into Toro, the first 3 deals we bought were in South Carolina, 2 in and around Greenville, 1 in Charleston. And then we haven't bought any in South Carolina since. We bought 1 deal in North Carolina in Wilmington, but that was a one-off. It was a special deal. It was off market, messed up financials, original owner developer, needed a ton of work. So a fluke, right? Not like a typical deal. And it was just cap rates went down, and I was like, okay, whatever. But then like we went into other areas and cap rates went crazy. But then just over the next year and a half, 2 years, it just kept creeping down and down and down and down and down. And this was at a time too when interest rates were creeping up and up and up and up and up. And it was like, as I was learning a lot of this stuff, it didn't necessarily make sense to me, and it didn't make sense in the office. So we started getting more creative with the types of deals we were buying and
Mm-hmm.
structures, and, kind of going more towards the distressed stuff, because we didn't have to necessarily worry about the cap rate and the yields you were getting on cash flow and all that stuff. And I think even for me thinking about that, it's like, it was always a battle to be like, okay, is this the new norm? Or do I still have to be very cognizant of 3 years ago, cap rates were at 6.25? Like, is that where we're going to head back to? And you have to continue to underwrite to that level. And if you sell for a 5, fantastic. Or is this just the new normal? Like, is this just the new world we're in? Is real estate viewed as that much more risk adjusted? Like, those are the questions that were continuously going on in my head. I was like, are we wrong for not underwriting to lower cap rates, or or are we right to continue to hold our ground because there's going to be some crazy reaction and cap rates are going to swing way back up, and we're going to be right, and a lot of people are going to be caught holding the bag. And I don't know yet if this is going to be that crazy swing that kind of resets the market, especially from a cap rate standpoint. But it was a little bit validating to like kind of see something happen and be like, okay, there's a lot of people that were underwriting to very high leverage, very high NOI growth very quickly, very heavily levered, little liquidity, very high valuations on sale. And a lot of people are going to left holding the bag, I think.
We have a deal under contract that we've had with two of our partners. These are guys we partner with on a bigger scale. We've been working on this since November.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to close May, but it's a complicated deal. I'll go public with it when it happens, but it's taken years off my life at this point. It's heavy value add. It's 110 or 115 units, 6.5 million purchase. We've loved the deal since day one. But this is actually the deal we spoke on the phone about literally like 6 months ago. It's still happening.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're finally getting close, but we'll see. But we have a rehab budget of about $2.5 million on this deal. Okay. Now this is all private money. This is not, there's no syndication. There's no liquidity coming in. We're taking a look at that now saying, okay, we have a few ways we can go with this. We still love it. We still love everything undermining it. But to your point, if this goes into a recession, the one thing that this market doesn't have is some of the job. We're kind of protected where we happen to be in New England over here. We've got Manchester, New Hampshire, where I invest. Boston's 30 minutes south, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. This is kind of this up and coming area, but it's not there like these other markets yet. So what we're talking about now is we plan that to be heavy on retail, heavy service industry, bartenders, waitresses. That was probably going to be double, maybe triple of what we usually get from a tenant base within this population, within this tenant base we're expecting. So now we're looking at, okay, how can we get creative? We don't want to walk away, but how can we make it work? So one thing we're kicking around is going back and renegotiating with the seller and holding more paper, doing some interest, things like that, because this thing is changing in real time, and you got to be proactive as an investor, to your point.
Oh, I hear you 100%. I think it's really interesting to hear that you guys are so aware of the tenant base going into it. Have you guys adjusted that deal at all? I think that this is a really good case study, right? Because a lot of people were in deals or, as deals are changing, over the last 1 to 3 weeks, or even maybe in the last couple of days. How have you guys adjusted or done different things?
Well, and I can tell you a conversation we had, and the lender we're working with on it told us our appraisal would be good for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And we also have a 6-month extension built in. Okay. And what no one's talking about, and those who may not be familiar with it, these appraisals, these aren't, $1,000 appraisals. These are $10, $15, $20,000 appraisals. Mm-hmm. So it's encouraging from the lender to hear that, but we're talking about having the seller hold more paper potentially for a year or two. Looking at the structure, maybe also selling some equity in the deal to bring in some more debt partners to diversify. There's a lot of things up in the air right now. And, if this does the one pro that we're also trying to figure out, we're not there yet. Say this does have an extended period. Okay, if you won't negotiate the buy side, does our labor costs shrink? If that market contracts, does that $2.5 million rehab now become 2.2, 2.1? Because that's
Interesting.
technically a savings there as well. Because that market now, my partners on this deal happen to be builders, so they got the finger to the pulse on that industry. They haven't seen a slowdown yet. It's only been a month, but if that starts to contract and we can save 10, 15%, I mean, we're going through and redoing this entire building.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things up in the air on it right now, but it's definitely going to be something interesting to monitor.
No, that's definitely an interesting thought because it's something I hadn't thought too much about because we've actually had the inverse problem of people not wanting to work, whether it's contractors finding workers or whatever. They just don't want to be out and about near people and doing things. So we've actually found the problem of like projects we have going on.
Yep.
Some of the conversations being like, hey, it hasn't happened yet, thankfully, but like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to have the guys to get this done as quickly as I said we were going to get it done. Or nobody said done it all yet. But if things continue to go into a more severe lockdown and more, restrictions get imposed, that could happen. So, but it's interesting to hear that the actual inverse could happen. If a lot of these projects get delayed or disbanded in 6 months when you pick up and there's not a lot of work, you can, have some negotiating power. And, I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of supplies come down in cost too from overseas because they've got to move inventory and things like that. I'm sure China's hurting right now because it was funny 4 weeks ago, everyone was talking about the inverse supply chain of China not sending stuff to the US. And now it's the complete opposite. It's China's back open or, Southeast Asia's back open and they're ready to go. And the US is like, we can't buy anything or we don't want to buy anything right now. So it's interesting to see that flip in the last 2 weeks. I'm curious how that'll play out over the next 2 to 6, 8 weeks of, maybe they're sitting on a ton of inventory and they got to move it.
Yeah, and look at something like, again, it's a weird example, but I tell people we monitor it closely because we do so much of it. But like, what's big in all apartment buildings, I know you guys use as well, but like that luxury vinyl flooring, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize because you're thinking, hey, you're doing one house. Okay, well, when you're doing 100 apartments, at say 600 to 800 square feet in an apartment, that thing has gone up this 1 year. That price has gone up, even on our price with the wholesale stuff, has gone up by about 15% this 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
If that even comes back 10%, now put that into a 200 unit complex in Jacksonville or somewhere where you guys are at. That's a huge savings on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're underwriting and really having your finger on the pulse of these things and finding opportunities and going and creating that value to make these deals work. Because anybody right now, and I know you guys at Toro do a great job, if you're still able to give your investors that near level of return and deliver that same quality in your deals, you will survive because you're going to be the guys who still got it done. Mm-hmm. And, whenever we do partner up with people, again, we use a little different method, but whenever we raise capital or do anything, take a working capital loan in our model, I tell people all the time, I will go sweep floors. I'll go work 3 jobs. I'll do whatever I got to do before I lose your money. Mm-hmm. Because I can always get money back. I can't get my reputation back. For and sure. Those are the guys who are going to come out of this, I think, a lot stronger. And I think that this might just, again, we started the call by saying, if you were doing deals in this very competitive market, there might be some real opportunity coming for you because you're already thriving when it's supposed to be hard. Mm-hmm. Now let's see what it's like on the inverse. So I'm excited. I'm curious. Obviously I want everybody to be healthy. I don't want to see anybody negatively affected, but it sounds like a challenge and some opportunities might come.
No, for sure. I mean, that's awesome to hear from you. I know for us, all of our asset management fees across all of our properties, we've waived for the foreseeable future. If we sell and, big profit, we'll accrue it. But for now it's, hey, we're doing everything we can to keep these things afloat. So, no, we're in the same boat as you. I know we're getting close to the 30 minutes. I don't want to go too long. From a personal standpoint, where I forget exactly, you said you're in, New Hampshire, right? Manchester?
We're in the New Hampshire market, yeah, Manchester, New Hampshire, yeah. How's
it been like by you from a local level, personal level, things like that? How have you been affected? How's things been?
And again, I go back to having a team and having a system, and it's funny how your life experiences help. You used to run the school and being on the administration level, I like to control the message. And I think that really came here. We were pretty proactive. We sent a letter and an email and a text with resources to all of our tenants early.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted, even kind of anticipating it because we saw it coming down. Fortunately, that worked out. And again, we're a smaller real estate company, and we use our systems on the backside. But I think by having that communication, knock on wood, we're in good shape for April. We did work with some of our lenders. We're going to take advantage of a few things for the next few months. Personally, it's been tough to see, some of these tenants who, this is their home. I mean, we tend not to think of it like that because we're investors sometimes, we forget this is where they live.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in an apartment, single mother. I know what it's like. That is home. And some of our best tenants saying, hey, I really appreciate you guys working with us. Like one thing we did, we gave $100 off to everybody. It was just something we wanted to do to try to help everybody. It didn't matter if you lost your job or not. We were doing it across the board. We just kind of wanted to build that sense of community that we have and keep that going. And some people are so appreciative because, they've been with us for a year, 2 years now. And to see these people who just want to go to work and they're being affected, it hurts. I mean, no one doesn't want to earn. No one doesn't want to go, have this level of uncertainty around their housing. And, I wish we had enough to say, hey, take the next 3 months and we'll figure it out for you. But what we've done is we said, here's the resources. It's a fluid situation. Let us know where you're at and we will work together. We will make a plan case by case to the best of our ability to get through this together.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we talked about, those fundamentals, stress testing your deals, having that ability and really building that sense of community. And I think if you've got that relationship, your tenants appreciate that. But it's been hard. I've got a lot of friends in the area who own bars, who own restaurants, who they don't think they're going to make it out of this. And that's going to have a long-term effect. And I think that's what everyone's very focused right now, rightfully so, on the virus. But the long-term impact of these businesses that we frequent, that we establish, to really make a community, if they don't come back, I mean, that's someone's livelihood. That's someone's dream that you're watching, kind of die. It's kind of scary and sad.
Yeah. No, I think that's one, fantastic what you did, and two, I think tremendous insight. It's actually interesting. John and I were talking about this yesterday about bars and restaurants and things like that, but we don't really know anyone that owns it. Can you, for whatever level of experience, obviously I don't believe you're an owner or anything, but if you know people that are in it, how are they viewing it? Is it like, hey, we're, this is our life savings and it's done? Or is it like, hey, we're going to have to shut down, but maybe it's something we can do again in 6-12 months? Like, what are you seeing in that sphere?
So the best example I can give, we actually do rent. One of our buildings that's a mixed use has 2 commercial tenants. One is a bar, and the gentleman with that, and he owns, I think, 5 speakeasies around New Hampshire. Speakeasy Fiends Bar, good buddy of mine. And he had such an interesting insight because he has such a big, diverse employee group. And we met the other day, and he had a list. And this is what made it real for me. He had a list of probably 30 bars and restaurants in the area. And it's a pretty good area, Manchester, very up and coming, a lot of businesses. I think he said he predicts, because he's talked to his network, 27 out of the 30 to close permanently and not be able to reopen.
Wow.
And since we had that meeting, 6 or 7, he was sending it to me, I think 6 or 7 of them have already closed permanently. And this is a whole different conversation we can go deeper on. But as much as we push our NOI with our apartments, we're actually pretty under market on our bar. And the reason was we wanted a stable commercial tenant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's going to be some landlords who might be anticipating this refilling easily. But I don't think they see the impact that's going to come. I mean, some of these businesses just are not going to make it out. And after a couple of weeks to be closing, I mean, I was listening to a podcast and it scared the hell out of me, where it was actually the Bigger Pockets business podcast, a great podcast. They had a restaurateur on, the guy who owns the top sports bar in the country. And he said, he was reading an article that cited 75% of bars or restaurants might not make it back from this.
Wow.
And if that doesn't scare you as a consumer, and how much we're all affected by that in the economy, like, I think there's going to be some opportunity in that market to get creative, because obviously that model, if your model cannot sustain a month to 2 months, something's out of whack somewhere in there. There's going to be some opportunity. So it's something we're looking at.
So I don't quite understand that, because from my standpoint, and I know nothing about bars, restaurants, whatever, like literally nothing. I worked as a college bartender once and I got fired because of it. So that's my experience. I'm the worst person. So
Yeah.
help me understand this a little bit more. Um, if there's all these areas that are set up for these bars and restaurants,
Yep.
wouldn't it be very easy for someone to just, without a lot of capital, a lot of change to the retail space? Because right, retail, a lot of times you got to build the suit or whatever. Couldn't you come in, make that space work, and just open a new restaurant with not a ton of capital if everything's already set up
That's the issue.
for that space?
You just answered the issue. That's actually in it right there, and that's where the opportunity comes in. So think about what makes you and Toro good investors, right?
Mm,
What's made you successful? Your systems, your infrastructure. It's a low barrier of entry, but you're able to exploit it if you get good at it.
mm-hmm.
Restaurants, conversely, have an incredibly low barrier of entry, and when things are good, there's a lot of money being printed, and everyone's kind of hey. When things get tough, which is back to the guy I was telling you about, he's got 5. He's been successful. He's found a niche. A lot of these one-offs, it's a business, but in reality, it's a job that just happened to own it.
Right.
Rents have really crept up. When he was telling me what market rent is for bars in the area, I was shocked. I mean, I know Manchester pretty well from the multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying, to give you context, bars the size of the one in my building are usually going for $4,000 to $6,000 a month. You're talking about a 2,000 square foot bar. You're not talking anything crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to see it get that out of whack, you got to pull back somewhere.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a low barrier of entry. People can pop right back in. But is that really the way to do this and keep this sustainable? Because that impacts everybody. That goes and impacts me as a landlord with my tenants working there. That goes and impacts the community, the people coming out, and the certain things that are going on in that metro. And if they're going to fold at a rate like that, yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think because it was always for me, obviously I can understand why they can't continue to operate, but why is it that in 3 months they can't open up a new bar with a new name at a new location if, hey, we're out of business, like, sorry, we couldn't pay rent or anything. Like, I don't know if maybe it's credit gets impacted too much or they just don't have the cap. Like, obviously some people aren't going to have the capital to do it. Like they entered the game too late. They didn't have enough liquidity, whatever. They don't have the capital, but there's going to be a good portion of those people that close down that will have the capability to reopen again. Maybe they were very successful operators. They can go out and get some sort of a loan to get started or things like that. And I guess for me, I understand the closure aspect of it. Like 75% seems very high. It is very high. But why isn't, I guess for me, my question is like, what is the reopen rate? Like, is it, if 75% close, of that 75%, is it 25% are going to reopen within 3 months? Is it 50? Is it 75? Is it 100? Like, because I can understand why it recloses, but if everything's there set up, it should be somewhat relatively easy for 3 months after, lockdown ends and people are looking for bars, restaurants. Like as soon as they say, hey, work from home's over, there's no limit on things, I'm going straight to the fucking bar. Like that's what me and my buddies are doing. And if there's no bars open, there's going to be some long ass lines. And if there's no bars open, there's going to be people with some money looking to open up places. Like that's just the reality of what it is. So within a few months of that opening up, for me, it almost seems very, and I'm also in New York, so it's a little bit different. I understand that. But it seems very understandable for there to be a very easy transition into new places or new ownership stepping in and opened up very quickly.
And that's where, again, if you're looking at just the macro level and back to the community versus the macro level, right? I think opportunities will be there for people to deploy capital. It's just staying in the cycle, because when something happens again, it's a low barrier of entry. However, that actual individual, that person that's built up that team, that restaurateur and his team, that person might not come back because this is their one shot. And the thing that no one's talking about, and I'm driving my wife up a wall at this point, but it's now needed more than ever. And this is something we want to get back into from an education standpoint, is financial literacy. I am shocked that, obviously this was a crazy event, but 2 months ago, we were told we have the strongest economy in the history of the United States. And in under 2 months, we now might have the Great Depression part 2. Like these two things seem wild. And the missing piece is financial literacy. It's having reserves. I was talking to my insurance guy because he's got all these, bartenders and restaurateurs calling him. No one does reserves. No one's teaching the same stuff we have to learn as investors, as multifamily investors, just because we have to show it to the bank. No one's looking at that within those models.
Mhm.
And now we're seeing how they're all kind of tied together, because if your tenants can't work at these establishments because they're closed, it affects your bottom line. And it's kind of all this cycle that I think there's going to be an opportunity for people really just have to understand, P&Ls and balance sheets and having reserves and what truly investing in financial literacy is. Because that's what I think is going to come out of this is guys like you, guys like me, we're going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. That one-off person, that mom and pop, they're probably not going to make it back from this. And that's, so when you ask me personally how I'm feeling, that's something that I've been surprised that it's kind of just a crazy thought. It really is.
No, I hear you. Because even just from a personal standpoint, like I have a lot of friends and buddies from college and high school who are not in the financial world. They're doing other things. They're coaches, teachers, government workers, healthcare, whatever, and they don't deal with that stuff. And even people that work for big companies but don't necessarily deal with the finances of that. And even I know people that work in finance for big companies and they still don't necessarily understand how it all works because there's such a, and anybody that is in this position, don't take this the wrong way, but there's such a small cog in such a big machine that they don't see the big picture of how it works. And it's like, they'll talk about like, I just remember statements of like popular bars or popular restaurants, or whatever. And they're like, oh, that place must be making bank. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, look at how many people are there. I was like, that doesn't mean shit. I was like, you can have all the business in the world, but if every single dollar is going to all your expenses and you net zero, you're wasting your time. Like if your rent is too high to support whatever you're selling, you could buy hot dogs for $1 and sell them for 50 cents and have the most customers in the world. You're going to lose money every month. Doesn't mean you're making money. So for me, it was always that concept of like, people don't grasp the big picture and don't think about things. They just see and interpret like the base level, and then they don't think further. And also we just have a predisposition as people to not think about the downside more than the upside. We get greedy and we have short-term memories and stuff like that. So I really think in like 6-12 months we're going to be back on our same bullshit. But
Yep.
but yeah, I hear you 100%. I think it's going to be a wake-up call for a lot of people. I think people are going to learn some really good lessons, and I hope they're able to recover and carry those lessons going forward and be better off for it. Like, the 30-year-old bar owner who just got smoked, probably got it, without any medical issues, another 50 years to live, 60 years to live. It's more than what they've lived already. That's a really great lesson to learn at 30, carry with you going forward. So even though it might feel like the end of the world now, it's a really strong, visceral lesson to learn and stuff like that. Like in a weird way, I'm almost like, oh, like I can't believe like we're like, this is happening. Like, I'm like, this sucks, but I'm like, okay, this is what people talk about when they're like, I've never been through the downturn. And it's like, okay, I'm experiencing it. I want to like remember this and experience it and understand and learn as much as I can from this, because it's only going to make me better going forward. And in a weird way, it makes me excited because it's like, okay, this is where the good stuff happens. This is where you learn your lessons. This is where you learn your values, and this is where you carry it forward. So in a weird way, without like, I hope nobody takes this the wrong way at all, but like I'm excited for this period because I think it's going to benefit me personally for the next 50 years, even if the short term is going to suck.
This will be, to your point, and you can't feel bad about it because it's human nature. If you truly believe in capitalism, which I do, which I'm sure you do, this is exciting because this will be, unfortunately, but it will be the greatest transfer of wealth in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. If we're going to see the opportunities that are going to come up right now, what I've been kind of doing is I've been calling everybody, picking everybody's brain, and I kind of always circle back to the same things, and they come up in our investing. And I got this way by listening to a lot of people who have been doing this for a very long time. And they always seem to have the same themes. They might word it different, but the themes are there. You don't wait to buy real estate. You buy real estate and wait. And you make your money on the buy. And you don't over leverage. And you stress test your deals. And if you buy for cash flow, appreciation is great, but you don't bank on it. And you have your systems. You run it like a business from day one, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're seeing it play out. And like I said, I don't want to take a pay decrease. My partners and my wife certainly don't want to take a pay decrease, but this is why you buy assets and not liabilities. And you should be excited because it's going to test your skills, and you're going to come out of this, and I'm going to come out of this, and every investor is going to come out of this either better or worse. And it's going to be what you put in. And, do you want to look at it like a negative, or do you want to strap on your boots, get after it, and see the opportunity in front of you?
No, absolutely. I think that's an amazing way of putting it. Great place to wrap up as well. Mike, thanks so much for coming on. Dropped a ton of knowledge. I know IG wasn't exactly what we hoped it was. So where can people follow you on Instagram? And then also, is there any other websites, other social media, things like that, where people can learn more about you, follow you, get in touch with you, et cetera?
Yeah. The Instagram handle's at mketchen, MKETCHEN. And our website is www.cc-rei.com. And feel free to reach out to email there. We're always more than happy to help. I'm still a teacher at heart, so I can't let that go. So always happy to help, and I look forward to talking to you again, Chris.
Awesome. No, thanks for coming on. Guys, if you are on IG Live, I will have this up on YouTube in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, give or take. So be sure to go check it out. Thanks for watching.